My earliest interests in art were drawing horses all the time. I don't know what it is about horses that really inspired me. My daughter was the same, just loved to draw them the most, and I always wanted to be an artist. I was influenced definitely by my father, who was an artist, and he didn't exhibit or practice his art when I was a child. But he had this portfolio in a closet in our home, and also my grandparents would tell us about how he, when he was young, and they lived in Buffalo, and my grandfather was an iron worker, so moved from the reservation, from Six Nations, to different cities to build the buildings, basically. A lot of Indigenous men were hired as iron workers, so my grandfather was one of them, as was my uncle. But anyway, they settled in Buffalo, and at a young age his artistic ability was recognized, and he went to classes at the Albright Knox Gallery in Buffalo, which is an international renowned museum, and he won an award when he was really young, and I remember seeing that newspaper article. And so with that training he had, there was a portfolio in our closet, and there were only about 3 or 4 drawings in there with his drawing board, and one of them inspired me the most, which was this great crayon drawing of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs that was just perfect, like Walt Disney had drawn it, that my father had done when he was young. And I continually went to that to get out his portfolio, and I took it over and drew it. It was a canvas portfolio, and I put in big marker my art, so he didn't mind that. I also drew on his drawing board because I didn't know what the drawing board was for. So I did try my best to draw that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs on the drawing board. Did not turn out well, but I continually tried to draw that. But he was such an inspiring person. The first artist I ever knew for many, many years, probably my whole childhood, because we did not go to art galleries. My dad liked to golf. We lived in a golfing community. We lived in the suburbs. We weren't raised to know our Indigenous identity at all. And and we were raised Catholic, so we had no clue at all about any kind of traditional art form. So I used whatever was around the house. And mostly it was lined paper for school, and pencils and pens, and would find anything else, cotton balls and glue and tape and anything. We always had crayons, of course. And any classes at school, anytime there was art that was offered, I would always just put myself full into that. So that was always my training, I guess, and my inspiration. So after high school, I didn't want to go to any more school, and I wanted to just work. So I did that for about 3 years, but then I went to university in Albuquerque. That's where I was raised. I lived there for 20 years, and far, far away from our roots in Buffalo and Six Nations, where my father and grandparents and great-grandparents were all born. A lot of relatives too. So when I was 21, I decided it's time to go to the university, and I thought I wanted to be an architect because my dad, he was an artist, but his job was a draftsman at an architectural firm. So I went to the university, and I realized right away, after taking a physics course, I didn't complete the physics course, and a calculus course, I didn't finish that. I realized I was not cut out to be an architect. That was not my forte. I did not have the interest or the drive to learn that. So I was always taking art courses for electives for my first year at university, and then I realized you can get a degree in art. So I immediately went and switched my focus to visual art, and took classes in Albuquerque for 5 years, part-time and full-time, while I worked full-time all the time, and then finished my degree at Western in visual art, Bachelor of Fine Art. So when I moved to Canada in 1989, my cousin worked at the Woodland Cultural Center, and she was the gift shop administrator, coordinator, and she was related by marriage to the museum director, Tom Hill, who's renowned and really, he's the one who really kept the Indian art. It started as Indian art exhibit, started I believe in 1972, and became the First Nations exhibit. I believe changed the name in the early 90s, and now it's Indigenous Art, the title of the exhibit. So Tom, at this family barbecue basically in the backyard, and he gave me some catalogs. These were my first introduction to the culture that I wasn't raised in. So Six Nations, I guess, history, art forms that I wasn't familiar with, and this exhibit, From Masks to Maquettes, is from 1985. This was actually initiated, the inaugural exhibition was at the McIntosh Gallery, and then it went to 5 other galleries. The second gallery was the Woodland Cultural Center, and then there were 3 others after that. But that was amazing to me. The carvers are a huge part of Six Nations culture, as a lot of Indigenous cultures around the world, I believe. And then this one was Indian Art 87. So I was given this exhibition catalog. This is, again, I moved in 89, but I started looking through this to see all the different art forms that I wasn't familiar with, which was ranges from beadwork, amazing beadwork, corn husk art, dolls especially, basket weaving, and leather work. It was pottery. It was phenomenal to me, all this that I didn't know. Also, this was the 3rd exhibition catalog that was given to me, either by my cousin or by Tom Hill, that first day that I came to Ontario, to Brantford, Woodlands and Brantford, and then went to the Six Nations. So Indian Art 89. This cover is Carl Beam, and he was still exhibiting then at Woodland, and he became a phenomenal artist, internationally renowned. Beyond being called a phenomenal Indigenous artist, he was just a phenomenal artist, and brought a lot of religious iconography into the Indigenous concept of his prints. I found it all really interesting, and it really made me try to think about what he's trying to say, and I was really influenced by that. For me, I've always been working. I've always had a split personality. I don't think that's unique. I think a lot of artists have day jobs, and they pursue their career. I've had 2 children, I've had full-time jobs, and I've always done my art simultaneously, but with that respect, I'm not as prolific as a lot of artists. I do produce work every year and exhibit every year, but it has been a challenge for me to find the energy and time, especially since I'm not getting any younger, let's say, for me to continually push myself, especially if I have an idea and I have to get it out, to get it going and get the energy within me around the rest of my life, and then get it done. Usually, the First Nations exhibit at Woodland, or Indigenous art exhibit at Woodland, is usually my mainstay. That has led me to other exhibits. I've been invited to do other exhibits from there. So, yeah, those are some challenges. I want art to, and I believe a lot of art has depicted certain times of history that otherwise might not have been recognized. and then these artworks from these historical periods that we have can be looked at in a different way too as time evolves. I hope that art plays a role in society that can speak for the injustices and situations that humans have created, and I really, that's what keeps me going. Well, definitely my work has evolved from being very ignorant before I moved here. Again, thanks to the Woodland Cultural Center and continually exhibiting there, seeing other artists' work, going to powwows. That's another thing we didn't do at all when we were in Albuquerque. In July at the Grand River, so Six Nations Chiefswood Park, Grand River powwow, learning about that definitely has influenced what I make, how I say it, and again, integrating the environmental concern that I initially started making art early in my university training to learning about myself as a member of Six Nations, my grandmother Mohawk, grandfather Oneida, learning about clans, learning about matrilineal lineage, learning about colonization, and researching on my own, just simply learning about the cultural identity that I wasn't raised in has definitely helped my work become stronger, more influential, and me more capable of speaking visually for these lessons that I'm learning. So I, as I mentioned, lived in Albuquerque for 20 years and was raised there. My parents moved us there. I'm not really sure why. My dad, I believe, had a job opportunity. Why we moved so far away from our relatives, though. I'm glad. I love Albuquerque. New Mexico's beautiful, and you don't know what you have till you leave. So what happened was my grandmother, basically, my grandmother who attended Mush Hole, she would go back regularly. My grandparents moved to Albuquerque by my father's insistence, I guess, or suggestion, because Albuquerque and New Mexico is so beautiful. So they moved first to Albuquerque, and then my aunts, a couple of my aunts followed, as well as cousins. And so did have extended family in my later teenage years, got to know my grandparents better, and my grandmother knew that I was very interested in art and going for an art degree. So she also knew, because she was going back and forth between Six Nations, Buffalo, and Albuquerque. She'd go back and forth probably 2 or more times a year. And she just said, would you want to move to Canada? It was a time in my life where things were happening that it was a good time to probably have a change. When she asked that question, I said, I don't think I'm going to be moving to Canada to go to university. They have wonderful universities there. And also I think because she knew about the Woodland Cultural Center with the Indian art exhibit, First Nations exhibit that was held every year, because my cousin, one of her granddaughters, worked there, and also my cousin was living on the Six Nations too. So I have a feeling possibly my grandmother thought maybe I could be more connected with the culture, being closer to Woodland, and so she planted that seed. I really like working not only with human-made materials. I like working with red tape a lot. Red tape has a double meaning to it. When I do some of my political artworks and I use red tape, I really have had fun selecting the stones for that woman who's being crucified. That piece really brings together Catholic upbringing that I had. as well as integrating the Mother Earth, what we're doing to Mother Earth, and that we are dependent on her. I loved choosing the stones. Stones have been here before all of us. Stones are eternal. Stones are part of the earth. And I do use a lot of sand, but I use sand on my artwork more as a pointing towards, again, earth. And we're part of the earth. The earth is within us. And so I do like working with natural materials. I also like to plaster cast. I don't do a lot of self-portraits, but I do plaster cast parts of my body for different pieces. So this is my arm, and I don't know of anybody else that would let me plaster their face or their arm willingly, and I can use whatever I want for that. And again, this piece too was when I was about to give birth to my daughter in '99. So I was probably 8.5 months pregnant there. And I like to do that too. It's kind of a moment in time that's an amazing, when plaster casts are amazing, I think. They're a real, it's just such an exact replica of someone's form. Yeah, I don't really have any plan. And that is, again, the fun of it for me. I remember a professor once told the class, choose one medium and do it well. And I remember feeling really frustrated and kind of sad, thinking, I don't think I could ever do that. I don't want to ever do that. And I respect people that completely who can stick to one medium and one style and let it evolve with color, with shadow, with whatever it's going to evolve with in their way. But for me, I can't ever plan or think what is going to be next. How am I going to make this? It's usually I'll hear something or see something on TV or see something in the natural world day to day. It could be anything, and I could pick it up, find something, and it could turn into something else. So there really is no plan. I really don't have a plan. Well, I hope my artwork impacts communities in their understanding, or maybe their questioning of what it means. If they see something and I'm trying to make, to me, a clear statement about something that I find to be an injustice. Some of my works can be, I do try to have some humor in them, because another professor once told me that pathos can be really digested much easier when there is some sort of humor. And I do, as I'm learning about all kinds of artists from all different genres that are Indigenous, so much humor is involved that sometimes it's hard to see. Sometimes the humor will draw people in, or the beauty will draw people in, until you really look at it and you really maybe question what's going on here. And I hope my artwork does that also. Sometimes there is no humor. There's no way that humor will be a part of it, and I don't want humor to be a part of it. I hope that my artwork will be understood or make people think, what am I trying to say? This is a little disturbing, or I didn't know this, that you are trying to, the information that you've put out on your artwork. I hope to educate. Well, Woodland has definitely been like an extended family of mine. It's an hour away from London. I'm back and forth regularly. I was honored to be asked to two permanent installations there. One of them is a garden, and it's led to me meeting other artists and me doing other exhibits at other galleries, primarily in Canada, and more so than that in Ontario, but it's just been my hub. I go regularly with our dog to various hiking trails in the woods here, a lot at Westminster Pond. Now I'm learning to meditate as I'm getting more mature, and I really like to take the time to look at something as simple as the clouds moving. So getting into those real simple natural phenomena that happen all the time. Nothing's ever the same. Everything's always changing. And at night, looking at the stars, wondering about the universe, our place in the universe. I don't know if I'll ever reach the final goals that I have. Learning your native language is the key to really learning your identity. So I feel that as I speak English, with a few Mohawk words, a few Oneida words, I'm inching there, but I can't wait till I get there, if I ever do. But in the meantime, continuing with making art as I need to respond to instances that I might hear on the radio, on TV, see in life, day to day, that I think some people might not otherwise know about. And so where that will be, I don't know. What that will be, I don't know. As well, I really am trying in my painting, when I do choose to paint, I'm really trying to reduce the detail that I've learned in a lot of my university and high school and elementary school art classes to draw realistically, to be more stylistic. So not abstract, but I look at Norval Morrisseau's work. That was the Woodland style. The more feminine version was Daphne O'Jig. And so I really am trying hard to reduce the detail, which is so hard because I get so caught up in the detail. Anyone who knows me would know that. So I've got a few proud moments. So in '97, I don't know if the magazine is still around. It was called Equinox, and I think David Suzuki. Anyway, one of my professors told me that he saw an article that I was mentioned in, which I didn't know about. So I went and bought the article, and Tom Hill, it was just a page, and Tom Hill did recognize me along with 4 other artists, and the heading of it was Get a Start on New Native Art. So that was in '97 that I was recognized by Tom Hill as one of the new First Nations artists. Around the same time, '97, I was invited to do an exhibit at the Walter Phillips Gallery in Banff Center for the Art. That was a highlight for me. Staking land claims, that was organized by a wonderful artist, photographer, Patricia Dedman. She's phenomenal writer, curator, artist. She organized the exhibit, and it went from the Walter Phillips Gallery in Banff to Thunder Bay Art Gallery to Woodland Cultural Center. And that was the biggest traveling exhibit that I've ever done. So that was a highlight for me. From that exhibit, again, the same professor who told me about the magazine article in Equinox, he lived in Old South here in London, ran into him in '99, and he congratulated me, and I didn't know what. And he said, "You've got one of your images in Canadian Art magazine. And I didn't know about that. So I went and bought the magazine, and it was an article about the Banff Centre, and it was called The Magic Mountain. And whoever wrote it chose artworks that were exhibited ever since the beginning of, I guess, well, they're of the Banff Centre. Chose one of the installation that I did, the large installation that I did for the exhibit that was there in '97. So that was a highlight. And definitely getting my degree from Western, finally, because it took in total 10 years. So going to university in Albuquerque, part-time, full-time while I worked, full-time always, making the move here, losing a year, attending Western for 2 years, taking a year off to have my son, raise my son for a year, go back to finish my degree. That was a challenge, and that was definitely one of my landmark highlights.